Hey, Living Environment fans, it's Monday. Of course, I'm filming this on Sunday, so I'm enjoying this beautiful day. I hope you enjoyed the beautiful stretch of weather here in Peru. If you didn't, if you were somewhere else, I hope you had nice weather too, but it was spectacular all break. Couldn't have asked for more, that's for sure. Anyway, we're back at it now with the new bell ringer, and it's time to make the donuts. Da 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 do 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 da 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 do do. All right. Da 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 do do do. Hey now. Da 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 do do. Mr. Kovacs class. It's really fun. It's Mr. Kovacs class. You might learn a ton. It's Mr. Kovacs class. It's interesting too. It's Mr. Kovacs class. And he's super cool. It's Mr. Kovacs class. Hey, all right. When we last met, we were talking about this guy here, Chuck D, Charlie D, old Mr. Darwin. And of course, he's famous not for discovering evolution, right? He didn't discover evolution. We know evolution happens. We just got to look at the fossil record for that. He came up with a mechanism which he called natural selection, which he based off of the idea of selective breeding. He said that if you could make all these different types of dogs and pigeons and stuff through the hand of man selecting who gets to reproduce and who doesn't, and who lives and who dies, then perhaps nature does the same. Natural selection. Recall Darwin, back when he was a younger man, went on this voyage around the world on a boat named the HMS Beagle. And the primary job was to survey the coast of South America. Okay? And his most famous stop, but they went around the world. I mean, that's pretty cool. His most famous stop was just off the coast of South America in the Galapagos, where he noticed that there were animals there that were similar to the ones in South America, but different than. And it was almost as if the islands shaped the way the animals looked. For example, in South America, there were tortoises, land-dwelling reptiles with shells, tortoises. On the Galapagos, there were also tortoises. They looked similar, except they were much, much, much larger on the Galapagos. Plus, it was said in the Galapagos, you could tell what island a tortoise was from by looking at its shell. So it was like, even in the Galapagos, the tortoises were slightly different from each other if they were isolated on different islands. So Darwin's idea was that somehow tortoises came from South America to the Galapagos. But while they were there, they were under different selective pressures. There was less vegetation, fewer predators, so they could afford to grow larger and larger and larger. And then on the islands where the vegetation was close to the ground, they retained their kind of dome-like shaped shells. But on some islands where the vegetation was higher up, where you had to reach up, they had these, what they call the saddleback shells. And it was almost like if you couldn't reach, you weren't going to reproduce. And so only the tortoises that had these little mutations that allowed them to fit a little bit better in their environment, they're the only ones that reproduced. And so that, of course, led to a change in the way the tortoises looked, or an evolution of tortoises. And Darwin argued that this is the way you can get these new species. He, of course, wrote about this in his famous book called Origin of Species, and where he outlined the idea of natural selection, which in a nutshell is you have one species. If you can isolate a group of them and then change the selective pressures and don't let them rebreed with each other, eventually, over a long period of time, you'll wind up with a slightly different variation of that original species. You can get two species. They're going to be different from each other, but they're still going to look similar. And then he extrapolated, well, if you did that for millions and millions and millions of years with all of the different living things, you could go from, for example, single-celled organisms to insects with a number of these steps. He thought the key was time. You need an immense amount of time. We know that in our studies, time is a little bit subjective because it depends on the animal's reproductive rate. We've seen examples like these hawthorn flies being changed into apple maggot flies in just a period of a couple of 100 years. That's barely the blink of an eye in geological time. So this week we're going to wrap up our study of Charles Darwin and natural selection. Just as a quick reminder that you have a test on Thursday of this week. The study guide is up in the stream, of course. And we've got a couple of lab things to do this week that have to do with evolution and evidence for evolution and natural selection and those types of things. All right. And then the quarter ends on Friday. So anything that's outstanding from the third quarter, if it's not in by Friday, it's not going to count for you. So, yeah, take care of yourself. All right, let's have a great, great day and a great new week post break.